Well, good morning. It's September the 19th. It's a Thursday, and it's a beautiful day here in Austin, Texas. And today I want to talk about being transgender and how it relates to having different kinds of relationships as you go through your childhood all the way into adulthood. I do want to say that this is going to be a very long video. So for those people who want to stick around, thank you very much. And for those people who don't want to stick around, well, that's okay too. So let's get started. Growing up and then having to deal with people as a transgender person is not easy. It's, well, complicated. We'll just put it that way. It's the best way I can put it. It's just very complicated. Maintaining those relationships was always a very difficult thing for me. And now I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for other trans people, but I'd be willing to bet that there are other trans people who've dealt with similar issues as to what I've dealt with. Now, my life has been marked by three very important relationships. And these three relationships are when I was married. And during those marriages, like any other relationship I had been in, I loved the person who I was married to. I loved the person who I was in a relationship with. That much is for sure. But how to manage the relationship was always very complicated. I always felt awkward or like I was out of place. And it's because I was trying to force myself to meet a mold, this masculine mold that society and obviously the person I was partnering with expected of me. And I found it very complicated. I found it very difficult, and it made me feel uneasy and sometimes less than human. I never really understood why I had to conform to this particular mold, but I knew that if I didn't conform to that mold, that there was some kind of trouble that was going to come from it. I can go back to the period of time in my first relationship. I was young. I was 21 years old when I got into my first relationship, long-term relationship, where it resulted in a marriage. And eventually a child, just one child, but you know, it was awesome and wonderful and everything that came with it. But I cannot very distinctly remember how complicated that was for me because I cared about the person very, very much, but I would lie to that person constantly. I would lie about some of the silliest stuff, you know, imaginable. And it was to create this character, this person, this persona that, you know, she expected me to be. And I would lie on top of lies to maintain other lies. And I never really understood why I bothered so hard to pretend to be something that I wasn't, but I did anyway. And that's no way to build a relationship. You know, it was no wonder the relationship eventually ended because you can't have a foundation built on lies. And there was just one lie after another. And I know, because my partners are all very smart people, and I know that they saw through a lot of the stuff that I was doing. I just don't think they ever understood why I was doing it. I understood, and obviously being transgender and coming out and coming to these realizations has helped me to better understand why my relationships had failed in the past. Moving into the second relationship, you know, it started just like the first one did. You know, I got into a relationship. The person was, you know, really awesome at the beginning, and I created this persona that got them to want to go out with me in the first place, and then immediately went back to masking. I masked myself. I masked everything about myself to create this image that I thought they wanted to see or they wanted to be with, and it always made me feel really uncomfortable. And even during carnal relations and stuff like that, I never felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I always felt a little off or a little odd. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it. Of course I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being with the people that I was with. It's just I didn't feel like I was 100% what I was supposed to be doing. And you know, that relationship also resulted with a child, and of course it ended. It ended the same way the first one ended because the entire foundation of the relationship was built upon lies. And that's, again, no way to create a relationship. You know, and a pattern was developing. Even the people who I wasn't married to, the people who I just dated for a little while, was resulting in the same exact outcomes. And, you know, I'm the common denominator if you really look at it. And it continuously progressed to a stage of, you know, ultimate depression. I became depressed because I wasn't happy. And I wasn't happy because I wasn't being myself. But I couldn't feel like I could be myself because if I tried, I thought society would lash out and come against me. My family would abandon me. My friends would abandon me. You know, and ultimately in the future, that kind of happened anyway. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, before I go into the next important relationship that I've encountered, I want to give everyone a trigger warning. This is depressing. It's honestly very depressing, and it talks about possibilities of self-unaliving. So if that's a thing that's triggering for you, if that's something that you don't want to listen to, then I would say stop watching this video right now before we go ahead and continue. That being said, I had been single for a little while. I had quit drinking. I was trying to essentially find myself, and I got picked up for a deployment with the United States military. This would have been my fourth and final deployment, and I was there for over 15 months. And during that period of time, I had lots of people who I'd worked with very closely that were injured. I had one, very specifically, that didn't get to come back home at all. It was a tough deployment for me. People that I cared about, people that I was close to, were hurt or injured or unfortunately didn't come back alive. And when I finally got back home, this is sometime around 2011, I got back home. You know, I had survivor's guilt. I had a lot of issues that I was coming back to that I just didn't know how to deal with. You know, you go through the post-deployment nonsense where you get your mental health evaluation, and of course you lie on everything because you don't want to be bothered and you don't want to get discharged for being weak, or, you know, whatever nonsense I thought at the time. And that's exactly what I did. I told them I was perfectly fine, I was healthy, I was mentally stable, I was good to go, and there was nothing wrong with me. When in fact, there absolutely was. I was depressed and I was sad, and even angry, like severely angry. Not to mention the entire time I was deployed, these feelings of being trans, these feelings of the incongruency between my gender identity and my sex assigned at birth, really reared their ugly head a lot while I was deployed, because you have nothing but time to think when you're sitting there at night wondering if the next mortar is going to come in and land on your chew. So when I finally got home, a lot of this came to head, and I spent the next year unemployed. I spent the next year depressed. I spent the next year just running around trying to get things accomplished, and I couldn't. I had owned a home, and I was basically getting foreclosed on because I just couldn't make any money because I was too depressed to actually go and do something useful with myself. I was not active duty anymore. I was back to National Guard status, so I wasn't really making any money from the military either. I'd gotten to a very low point. And on my birthday in 2012, I decided that was going to be the day I was going to end it all. And I had found an opportunity based on a gift that a friend of mine who had passed away left me. It was his service revolver. And I was going to use that to essentially end myself. And I sat in my empty house that was being foreclosed on with that thing in my hand, and I put it in my mouth, and I was ready to go. And all of a sudden, my doorbell rang. And the doorbell was, you know, a good friend of mine named, I'm not going to use his real name, I'm just going to call him Tom. Tom came down and knocked on the door with another buddy of mine, and we're going to call him Mike. And they said, hey, we wanted to take you out for your birthday. And I was like, oh, well, this seems a bit inopportune. I'm busy right now. I was trying to shoo them away, but they managed to drag me out of the house. And when I got down to downtown, I was like, you know what, okay, I'll celebrate with them, and then when I'm done, I'll go back and I'll finish what I started. And while I was sitting there in my depressive state and listening to them jabber on about whatever nonsense they were talking about, I looked up, and then I saw the most beautiful girl I think I'd ever seen in my entire life. I saw her. And I was like, wow, holy crap, she's amazing. You know, a lot of feelings kind of rise about what came about from that. And I wasn't sure what to do. And of course, my friends picked on me and were like, you should go talk to her. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. They picked on me enough where I finally did. But all the feelings I had about going back home and finishing what I started went away when I got a chance to finally talk to this girl. And that was my third wife. That's how I met my third wife. And I know it's putting her on a pedestal, but I often contribute my ability to not self-unalive on the fact that I met her. And that's a really toxic way to start a relationship too. But I know during the course of that relationship, it was much the same. I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't know how to be honest with her. I lied to her about who I was. And ultimately, that led to the same outcomes of the previous two. But I will say that the 10 years that I got to spend with her were absolutely amazing. And I never have any regrets about that. But to tell this story is to say that relationships as a trans person, before you come out and before you're honest with yourself, are extremely complicated and often result in some very negative outcomes. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope everyone's learned something today. And if you found this valuable, leave me a comment and tell me so. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. I know these videos are super long, and I hope you found them useful. Have a great day.